traditional Korean values of respecting your elders, automatically I am always going to healthcare innovation would be better served with more.
Is there any negotiation tactic that you use or you like?
Me, it's really important to be like true to yourself. And so, for example, I'm not abrasive, loud kind of person. And I don't think trying to be that kind of person would work in salary negotiation, right? It's like, because they've worked with me this whole time. And if I suddenly come in like just really rough and abrasive and say, this is what I want, or I'm leaving, like that's just not in my character. What's helped for me is to just be very honest about where I'm coming from, where I'm at, opportunities that maybe I've been approached with, or opportunities I know exist for me. And then even just being very open about like where you are financially. I've told different employers before, like I have student loans to pay, and these are the things that are priorities for me. And so that's why I need to find, a position that can pay at least this much, or else it's going to be harder for me. Making those conversations real and allowing the person that you work for who makes that decision to see you as a person, and your life is helpful.
Totally be you. How would you say your identity as Korean American shaped how you practice as a nurse?
In some ways, it's a double-edged sword. My parents and my family definitely raised me with a lot of like traditional Korean values of like respecting your elders. Automatically, I am always going to be very obedient and very deferential to people in positions of authority over me. Because of that, I don't always speak up when something is not fair or bothering me, or if I'm really overworked. Like it's very hard for me to have those conversations. It's almost like, I'll just work harder. It can be a disadvantage because I have met other coworkers who are a lot better with having boundaries and speaking up for themselves and saying, no, I can't do that. But for me, it's like, I can't say no, or else they're going to think like I'm not able, like I'm not capable, I can't handle the job. So I'm very quick to just say, okay, yes. I think in some ways that part of the Korean culture, though, makes you a very hard worker, can be a disadvantage, especially if others around you are able to create better boundaries and you're kind of always, taking on more than you should. So I think that has been a negative aspect at times. I think really the positive aspect, though, is, that term nunchi, I think has been really helpful. I'm able to, within the team, kind of very quickly pick up on how people are feeling, the dynamics, mesh really well with the dynamics of a team. Even more importantly, with patients, I can definitely read the room and see when a patient and a family is really overwhelmed, or they're getting impatient, or they're getting confused, or they're upset. And even if it means staying a little bit longer in the room after the rest of the team has left to like make sure you've answered all their questions, has been really rewarding in being able to build those relationships. The other flip side is knowing and like witnessing what my family and my parents and grandparents had gone through to come to this country and to find their place in a foreign country with a different language. I think has helped me have a lot more empathy with other people that I meet that are going through that. So when I meet people of all different backgrounds from other countries trying to navigate life in the US, and then I get to happen to meet them in the clinic or at the hospital, I think I have a lot of empathy for the challenges.
Thank you for sharing that. Not only Korean Americans, but people from other countries or with parents and grandparents who are immigrants, we learn from them, like we grow up with their values. Unconsciously or consciously, we practice and say and act in ways that we grew up watching. I was wondering how your experience shaped your identity as a nurse practitioner and when you see patients.
From watching my mom, I think she's one of those people like who's very hardworking. She sacrifices a lot for other people, but I just seen her approach so many different seasons in life with just like, all right, it is what it is, and you have to work hard and make it work and find ways to find joy in it. She can be very serious and focused, but she can also be very silly and loving. And I think the balance between those two is perfect. And like, that's kind of what you need to like be resilient. So in healthcare, a really important trait to have, because there are times where you just need to like really buckle down and be focused and provide the right care at the right time. And then there are other times where things are hard and you have to have enough balance to be able to bring some positivity into it and even be able to share that with your patients and families, right? That delicate balance of very opposite kind of things is important, because healthcare can be challenging at times. And sometimes you're taking care of patients during a time that is really like a crisis. It's one of those moments they'll look back and it was probably scary and maybe even pretty traumatic. And being able to figure out how to best support patients and families when they're in that kind of situation can be challenging. But when you're able to be there in a way that's helpful to them and meaningful to them, I think it's really great.
What would you recommend to nursing students or nurses who dream of becoming a PNP? What qualities do you think they should focus on?
I think it's a very interesting relationship as a pediatric nurse or pediatric nurse practitioner, because there's a relationship with the patient, and then there's a relationship with the parents and the family. And I think being able to manage and navigate both is really important. For the kid part, you want to make sure you really do like kids if you're going into pediatric nursing, and the whole spectrum, right? You will take care of really cute, squishy babies, and you'll take care of adolescents, and they're in very different stages of life, and being able to value and appreciate each of those seasons is important. And that's kind of the fun of it, is to be able to adapt to each patient population at that stage of development and things that are happening socially and physically with them. On top of that, being able to translate that clinical knowledge into an empathetic perspective for the parents is very important as well, because whether you have a healthy or sick child, for the parents, it can be really stressful navigating all these different stages of their development and their child's life. Being able to develop a very trusting, strong relationship with the parents and families is important too, because a lot of the care is not just the child in front of you, it's that whole family unit, and being able to have those open conversations is really important.
As a clinician who have experienced the clinical practice and in the business world, what would you say is the difference and similarities?
The clinical side, like, you really get to see what's happening on the ground, like what's happening with the patients, what's happening with the nurses and the ancillary staff. You get the advantage of getting just a really good exposure of what's really happening. And I think that's so valuable. On the business side of things, it's easier to be far removed from that, right? Because you're looking at top line things, like you're zooming out to a higher level. You're looking at, if it's a health system, the health system as a whole, you're looking at budgets, like all these other constraints, policy things that are changing. It's kind of hard to remember or see all the little nuances. That's probably the biggest difference. But everyone has something to learn from each other. So I feel like the clinical side, it can be really frustrating sometimes when you feel like the business side, the administrative side doesn't really understand what you're doing. And then vice versa, on the business side, if you don't understand what's going on the boots on the ground, your decisions might be misinformed. Both ends of the spectrum have a lot to learn from each other.
The nurses and nurse practitioners, they really have skin in the game. They know what's important, what the patients need, what the providers and nurses need. On the flip side, we're slower making changes. Healthcare is notorious for changing. I was wondering what your thoughts are about innovation in nursing.
I do think nurses have such a valuable perspective. It's easy from a nurse's perspective, even if you have a really great idea, to feel like, oh, I don't know how this would ever become a thing because I don't know how to code. I don't know how to make an app. I don't know how to make a device. And so it's probably really easy to stop there because that's where you're at. But to be honest, I think there are a lot of resources out there. Having that nursing perspective can really drive innovation. And that whole piece of networking, looking what's out there, sometimes there's things like hackathons or even programs that exist where you can get more exposed to that world and make connections to people who can help build an innovation. Right? Even if you're not like an entrepreneur, you're not someone who's going to be thinking of like an inventor and thinking of an idea, any kind of innovation in healthcare, I can't think of one where like you wouldn't need a nurse's perspective, to be honest, whether it is like a medical device or some fancy wearable device that has like remote patient monitoring or, any of these different innovations. Nurses are such a critical piece of the healthcare infrastructure as a whole. There is a place for nurses in all of those areas. It's important for nurses, like I think we talked about before. It may seem like, oh, the only options in nursing is a clinical job. The reality is that there are other jobs out there that aren't always patient-facing, where a nursing voice and nursing experience is really crucial. Healthcare innovation would be better served with more nurses involved, with more of that nursing voice included.
And I see more nursing startups and entrepreneurs on LinkedIn, and I'm like yourself, I'm like very proud of how they are paving the way. I didn't know, or I wasn't researching. I wasn't interested. It's my first time knowing, oh, this is a new side of nursing. I wish that more nurses are aware of that this world also exists.
It's not something where you can just Google search nursing jobs and like find it, you're probably going to see a lot of those clinical jobs come first. But again, I think that's where those network and tapping into whether it's conferences or different organizations. And now there's like so many things available as webinars. Exposing yourself to those things, I think will then show you like, oh, this is what this world looks like. And then you start to see what those opportunities could be.
Mirini, if the audience wants to find you, where can they connect with you?
Messaging me on LinkedIn is an option. You can also share my email address. Either of those are ways that they can reach out.
Thank you so much for your time today. I had a lot of fun.